season, and on the occasion of the centenary of establishment the department. Today, we are honored to welcome our guest, Professor Ignacio Arce. Dr. Ignacio Arce is an architect and archaeologist specialized on late antiquities and early Islamic material. Director of the Spanish Archaeological Mission, several projects aim to the excavation, restoration, and presentation to the visitor of major Roman late antiquities and Umayyad sites in Jordan and Palestine, namely Amman Citadel, قصر الحلابات, حمام السراح, قصير عمرة, دير الخوف, قسطل, الحراني, and خربة المفجر. He has worked as a consultant of UNESCO, ICROM, GCI, WMF, and UNDP in Jordan, Palestine, Yemen, and Lebanon, and Syria, and currently delivered a Master in Architectural Conservation as Associate Professor at the School of Architecture of the Jordanian University. Before we hear from the professor, we will let the welcome speech of Akram Laweti to welcome his professor.
Thank you. On Professor Ignacio, we would like, on behalf of His Excellency Professor Al-Alawi and the staff of the DOA, would like just to welcome Professor Ignacio Arce. We know him, we are a friend. He's one of our member of our family from the DOA. He's working in Jordan since 1995. And from that time till now, he's working in the heritage of Jordan, and he's all of the, let's say, the results of his works, it was very fruitful and it was very successful, and all of these results, it's have been shown for everyone. And if you visit the citadel, visit Qasr al-Halafat or Hammam Sarah, or also Al-Mirjan and Qasr, all of these sites, it's one of the you can find the stamp of the Professor Ignacio there. So we don't need just to take a long time to take time. So we would like just to welcome you, and you are most welcome at the UAE, and we are honored today just to welcome you here and just to hear from you about all the results in these Islamic let's say sites. And Professor Ignacio, the floor is yours, and you are most welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Akram. Thank you very much indeed, Anna. Thank you, all of you, for being here, and to the General Director of the Department of Antiquities for his kind invitation to come here to share with you and to celebrate these 100 years of the existence of the Department of Antiquities. That, as Akram has mentioned, I didn't feel that I'm coming to as a guest. I feel I am coming home because I have been sharing for more than 25 years, let's say, so many days, works, happiness with the team, the personnel from the Department of Antiquities. So it is a way of finding back the family in these days of Ramadan that I also take advantage to celebrate and to wish you a Ramadan Kareem to all of you. So Dr. Fadi, when he asked me to give this lecture, he was, we were discussing this need and these plans that we have to share and to collaborate between the Department of Antiquities and the German Jordanian University, and even the possibility of establishing training programs for the personnel of the department. So that's why he was asking me, try to make like between a public lecture and an actual lecture, so that people will understand not only the beautiful results, but what is behind it, what is the procedures, the methodology, but without transforming this into a boring lecture in a classroom. Okay, so trying to do something dynamic and trying to explain what has been our aims and our, working plan during these years. Because I think that if there is something we should be, happy, and we should be also proud when we started with the Spanish cooperation, it was that we somehow set the footsteps and the first footsteps for a new approach in which we were not just excavating, but we were most importantly preserving, restoring, and even more important, presenting the site to the visitor, making a work of interpretation, presentation by means of first panels, then site museums, and now we are working, as we will mention before, we will mention afterwards, a guide app so that everybody will be able, let's say, to understand, let's say, all the values associated and, all the information that we can share from sites like Casa Rojalba, that is the first site we are working with. So this is just a brief information, or a brief introduction of where we are going to see today, okay? So as I mentioned before, first of all, we are going to deal about and discuss about what is archaeology of architecture in the framework of the analysis of historical buildings. This discipline that was born as a result of the problems that medieval archaeology had with the lack of sources, written sources, whether they were inscriptions, documentation, etc., and the fact that the only reliable document was the monument itself. So that these methods that were started by Harris and then developed by Tiziano Manoni and the Siena School, where I was trained, the Faculty of Archaeology. It was this idea of trying to interrogate the building as the most important and more reliable source of information about the history of that building. In general, we know that people, they say we are lucky when we have got inscriptions, when we have got documents. But I used to say to my students that usually men, when they write, they usually lie. But when we build, usually we are much more truthful. I always put down the example of the Dome of the Rock, where Caliph al-Mamun, he forged the inscription, he canceled the name of Caliph Abd al-Malik and put his own name to be proud, of something that was not his work. So, and this is a very good example that sometimes it's better to trust the work and not the words. And this is important also because it's, the archaeological analysis of this inscription what tell us that there is a forgery and that somebody has altered the content of the inscription. So this is important also when we are trying to achieve and to get trust information that is really trustful and that we can deal on it. Okay. Then, how was this developed? This was developed, as I said, by medieval archaeologists, and then they very soon realized that the building could be understood also like an archaeological deposit. Like as you can see in these two photographs, you have here a mixed archaeological site in which you have got walls, you have got layers, you have got the excavation of these tombs, these tombs that have been filled, they have been recut, etc. And people, they realize that this situation could be very much, or was really very similar to some situations that we had in the elevations of many buildings. And that if we understand that in the same way that stratigraphy was something that was developed by geologists to understand the age of the Earth, okay, to understand the sequence. First of all, to have a relative sequence of the history of Earth, and then to have an absolute dating. This method that was, adopted by archaeologists could be also applied, let's say, for the analysis of historical buildings. And this is really, the base of this debate and this analysis. So we can understand that, in the lower two figures, we can see how an archaeological deposit, it's the result of a mixed action of man and nature. In geology, the deposits are the result of nature. In archaeology, they are a mixed origin of man-made and nature-made. Okay, but also we can see the building as as an anthropic deposit, a deposit that has been created by man, as a result of building brick on top of brick, stone on top of stone, but also destroying part of it, rebuilding, blocking, opening new structures, and that this sequence of building activities that were leaving behind certain sort of material remains that could be assimilated to that could be assimilated to an archaeological deposit. It could be also analyzed using stratigraphy. So this is, as I said, this consequence of this realization that we could understand that also at the end of the day, we can see the whole thing as a single context in which geology, archaeology, architecture can be understood as part of a single context to be analyzed. Okay, in some cases, as we can see, we have got in archaeological context this mixed origin or this kind of mixed deposits, some created by nature, other ones like these buildings created by the action of man. And similarly, all the operations that, similar to what happened in nature, that the erosion creates negative actions and transportation of deposits that are deposited in some areas, the building activities from extracting the material from the quarries until its construction into a building could be assimilated to this process of, negative actions and positive actions that define this stratigraphy. But even we can also apply even sending to scale to the plastering and the layers of painting in a room. So this is, at the end of the day, we can see that the whole thing could be seen as a matter of scale. If we are, I used to say to my students, like having a zoom, whether you are using, a wide angle or you are focusing with a macro, you can, analyze from the geological context with the stratification, then how cities and the landscape archaeology is, extending this research to this, wider area of research, or we can even apply this method to understand the growth of city, or even we can take as example one building to see how it was created, how it was transformed, partly demolished, partly rebuilt, etc. And even we can descend into this scale to one single building to see how this building was transformed, the windows were changed, new doors were opened, etc. And even descending to the minimal level of the microstratigraphy of the renderings of one building. And as you can see, this is a matter of scale in terms of size and terms of time. Let's say in geology and archaeology, we are talking about millions of years or thousands of years, and the dimensions are also huge. Meanwhile, when we descend, with our zoom to the macro point of view, we see that the time and the scale of things are very small. It's only one building, one room, or even one corner of the room. We are not talking about huge extensions, but something very, very small. And even, the time of deposition, the deposition in geology are millions of years. The deposition of the paints, of the layers of painting in one room can be 5, 10, 20 years. So as you can see, the whole thing is to try to understand the stratigraphy could be used in this way as a global method that could be applied to analyzing also historical buildings. And that's why it was implemented, this idea of applying archaeology of architecture, using as a material culture, because archaeology, is the analysis of material culture, to consider in this case, the material culture that we were going to analyze, it was the architecture itself. Okay, and for that reason, the methods that we use are exactly the same ones that are used in archaeology. Say those archaeological and those archaeometric. Basically, the archaeological ones are, as we said, is first of all is the stratigraphy, but then the stratigraphy we can use it at the urban scale, the scale of the building, or even at the scale of the layers of painting of a room. And this what provides is a relative dating. By using this method, we know if two things are coeval or if the things are one after the other. So easy so far. It seems so stupid and so simple, but this is also the strength of the method, that we can decompose a very complex history of building or a complete area in a sequence of steps, that they are They have only two choices, or one is after the other, or both of them, they are coeval. That's it. And that's the simplicity of stratigraphy. The other methods is chronotypology, as we will see, that usually pretends to provide an absolute dating to this strata. And then finally, metric systems and the analysis of building materials that also provide, by means of instrumental analysis, an absolutely dating as well. So this is, as we mentioned in stratigraphy, these are the very few the building activities involved in the construction of a wall, for instance, implied minimum of 5 actions. One is the excavation of the foundation trench, the construction of the foundations, filling the foundation trench, and then the construction of the wall. So it's so far. So there are 5 building activities that left behind 5 stratigraphical units. So it's so, and this sequence of building activities, that is the stratification of the material that we have piled or built on top of each other, leave behind these stratigraphical units which constitute the building stratigraphy of the wall. This stratigraphy will provide us, as we said, a relative chronology, not an absolute one. Okay, this is what we mentioned in this situation. And then the second step is to provide, an absolutely dating to each of these strata. And this is done like in archaeology and like in geology. This first problem was created in geology when we needed the people, when they were trying to understand what was the age of Earth. They had like a sequence, and they have all these monsters and all these fossils, and then they were able, let's say, to datate the layers on the base of the fossils that were found there. This method was also adopted by archaeology, and instead of using fossils of plants or animals, they were using other type of materials, pottery, etc. These other kind of remains that provide us an absolute dating, so that this layer is Roman, this is Umayyad, this is Abbasid, etc. So easy so far. So and this idea of using this diachronic typology, this chronotypology as we know it, was applied into architecture by using different methods. The most important was the chronotypological analysis, trying to understand, on the one hand, what are the type of architectural elements that have been introduced or that have been created in that period. This is typical, Roman moultures, or these are Ammonite, or these are from the Mamluk period. And these elements are used as a chronotypological fossils that provide us an absolute dating to these different phases of the building. So as you can see, it's very easy, and this can be applied also to the building techniques, with the characterization of the building techniques, or even to the characterization of the mortar, or even of the pigments. So we can know that this building was painted using Cinco white. So that means that this layer, it has to be after 1870, when Cinco white was introduced, or if it was chromium yellow, we know that it's after 1890 whatsoever. So this provides, let's say, the same antequems and postquems that these fossils guides provide us in geology and archaeology. And finally, the third leg of archaeology of architecture is another methods like the datation methods, instrumental ones, that provide also absolute dating, that are thermoluminescence, then their chronology, but also this characterization of the building materials. So with these 3 legs, stratigraphy that provide us, a relative sequence, okay, absolutely dating that is provided by chronotypology and by this instrumental analytica, we can have, the history of the building. What is the sequence in relative terms, but also in absolute ones. And this is, as I said, initially what was needed by these archaeologists from medieval times. But also we understand that as a result of this process of achieving knowledge and transforming information into knowledge, we can also obtain very relevant information also of the building techniques. And this is essential when we are, implementing an operation of preservation or restoration, or in analysis, to know what methods of analysis. And this is also very important, also because it's the way we can also understand to distinguish the different stratigraphical units, because these stratigraphical units are nothing but the result of these building techniques. So as you can see, this is something very important, and because we get a double, line of information. One is historical, the other one is technical. Okay, and both of them, are reunited again when we are dealing with the excavation and restoration of sites. The first place where I was able to implement these techniques, 25 years ago in 1995, yes, when I came here, it was to apply this to this huge complex of Man Citadel that I was entrusted with, the task of excavating and restoring it. And this is the condition of the complex when I arrived, and then I started, let's say, to analyze the leftovers of previous excavation without excavating anything new, trying to analyze in detail what others they had excavated and to review what had been their interpretation of these sites. And this is this very famous example of this small corner of the excavation of Crystal Bennett of 1975 that allowed me to understand that this element was part of this row of shops, and that here what we had, it was a huge square plan, square in front of the Umayyad Palace that also represented a major change in the understanding of the site, because that means that up to that moment we had here an Umayyad Palace. From that moment we had a complete Umayyad city with all the components of the city. It was really remarkable. So there have been attempts to excavate this area, but they were excavating like 2 meters each year. Imagine that you would have taken like 10 or 15 years to excavate the whole square without finding anything. So in this way, it was just a matter of analyzing, these leftovers and to interpret correctly the stratigraphy. This very simple stratigraphy, as you can see here from these matrix surveys, these are the stratigraphical unit corresponding to these features. And basically, what we had here is that this was a broken element, an interface of destruction of a pillar that was built against that wall. This apparently simple thing triggered the conclusion that this was, the final point of this portico that was part of this huge building of the eastern section of the souk. This is what allowed me, let's say, to discover the souk square and also the mosque as well. This is the process of intervention, and this is the same method that we applied in many other areas of this complex to understand this quite complicated history and evolution. So in order to make the things a bit more not so boring, I have also tried here to present another interesting example. An example of Castle al-Halabat, where we not only applied this stratigraphical analysis to understanding this building that was very complex as well. This was the condition of the complex, and this is after the restoration. This was a very complex structure already analyzed by Dr. Gassi and by Kennedy, and they had come to certain conclusions, but these were incomplete. Say, the stratigraphy allow us to understand that the history of the site was much complex. That between the Roman fort and the Umayyad Palace, it had taken place this important phase that was the transformation of this former Roman building into a monastery, to a palace, certainly done by the Ghassanids. This was a major, very at first conflicted discovery, but it helped also to put us in context and to retrieve certain pages of history that had been neglected and had been ignored. We knew that the Ghassanids, they were qualified and described as philoptistides, lovers of buildings and great builders. And everybody was saying, well, where on earth are these buildings built by the Ghassanids? Here we have no time to go in detail with this situation, just to clarify that the strength and the power of this method of analysis allowed to retrieve the complete stratigraphical sequence of these transformations of building. So this was a major breakthrough and a major result of this process that was afterwards continued with the process of excavation and presentation. Today, as I said, what I wanted to present more in detail, it's the intervention and the research that we conducted in the mosque. This was very relevant because we went farther than the traditional, methods of archaeology of architecture, paying much more attention in this case to the analysis of the building techniques and the analysis of the fragments of the architecture, recognizing that even in archaeology, usually people say that the objects that are out of context, that are decontextualized, are very difficult to relate to each other. Okay, and this is true. Okay, it's very difficult, let's say, to understand if this object that has found out of context is from this period of, or it's later be used, etc. Okay, what I built, let's say, out of necessity, I developed further this research on the fragments to try to complete this building, and we will understand what was the process. So we came to the conclusion that when this site was overtaken by the Umayyads, they kept the use of the palace as such. Okay, and the only thing is that the former monastery that was in this area, instead of being transformed into religious section of the Umayyad period building, they could have built the mosque within the former monastery or within the former chapel that was here. They decided that they were going to build the mosque outside, as a symbolic and effective expression of the control of the land by the new power. Okay, and that's why they decided to build the mosque outside so that it will be seen from all over around. And this was really very relevant and very clear. We also understood this, that this was a building type that was very common in the early Islamic period. We have got several mosques with exactly the same plan, like Khanat Sebib or Al Walid, that is like a photocopy of this mosque. But then we understand to see that there were strange things. First of all, we thought that it was going to be impossible to do almost anything here, because as you can see, the mosque had been completely looted. On the contrary, in the castle itself, it was a long and painstaking process, but very fruitful, of excavating, classifying, reorganization of the stones, reorganizing them, and to rebuild them. So it was possible to complete this anastylosis, that is the restoration with the original fragments. And once we finished the anastylosis of the castle, we understood more or less all the section of the building. We still were left with hundreds of decorated elements, or swords, pieces with moldures, that we understood that they were not coming from the castle, that they were coming from the mosque. And this was, a very good and very nice surprise, because we realized that what had happened is that people who looted the mosque, they took the blocks, squaring blocks, and those that were strange things, like capital decoration, they were discarded. This is not useful. They were not recycled. So thanks God, they just recycled the cubic stones. So the point that we try, let's say, to understand the building, we look all the documentation, all the archives, what has been published, etc. Up to that moment, we started with the documentation using analogical stratigraphy, and we started also to analyze the structure. At first, actually, we only restored one facade because we thought that it was not possible to do anything else. But then started this incredible, game of like a jigsaw puzzle of putting the things together and to try to figure out where and how these fragments were coming from. Because, even statistically, it was very strange. There were so many fragments for such a small building that, it was apparently something that didn't make so much sense. So we started, for instance, with the mihrab. The mihrab, as you can see, it had been restored in the 80s with this semicircular shape, following the models of Khanat Sebib, etc. But then I realized when we excavated here, that as you can see here, the original fragments, they didn't correspond to a semicircular element, but they were a kind of polygonal thing, something really very weird. But then we also found fallen in situ some of the cornerstones with this angle. And this angle that was very strange was also the same that we found in these cornices. It was really very weird because this was the lateral angle of 156, that is a polygon of 15 sides. I say, well, yeah, ilahi, what is this? And there was also something strange because this then, implied precision, a geometrical precision, and a capacity from the architect that didn't match very well with some irregularities of the building. Let's say how it's possible that they are able to draw a polygon of 15 sides that frankly I wouldn't be able to do now by hand. But at the same time, this guy is not able to build a proper square building because the mosque is not square, it's distorted. So there were many things that didn't make so much sense. So we continue with the work. As you can see, finally we understood and we retrieved many of these fragments that allow us to prepare the external face of the mihrab. Then we found something really extraordinary. We started to find and to classify all these was sources that were from a semidome, including this beautiful piece, as you can see here, is the keystone that has handles to be inserted and to close the dome, something really unique. So we made the opposite process when you in stereotomy, when you create the stencils for carving the stones. From the stones, we created the stencil, and then with this stencil, it was possible, let's say, to recreate the remaining missing fragments of this wasor. And this wasors allow us, let's say, to complete the mihrab. And as you can see, we were lucky because we had stones from all the layers, so there was, the possibility of verifying 100% milli fil milli. That was the solution. And then finally, with the beautiful closing of the keystone. And then we started with something that was even more complicated. So it was like a sequence of challenges to try to organize something that was really weird. And the following thing was this, where all these decorated elements that didn't make any sense to us. Because contrary to what happened when people try to restore a Roman or a Greek temple, it's like you are trying to complete a text that architectural language is like written languages. You have got, a lexicon of certain forms of decoration, but also you have got a grammar, and this grammar is the classical order, for instance, that explain you what is the position of the column, the tablature, the capital, that the dimension of the capital is 9 times, and the head of the column is 9 times the diameter. Everything is very well regulated, and that's why when you see some of this Roman architecture analysis, with a small fragment, almost they can rebuild the whole building. Here, we were dealing with a language of which we had no idea. We didn't know the grammar, and we were learning about this new lexicon. Okay, and it was, like as I said, starting from the scratch. So actually, at first, we tried to figure out the organization of these stones, thinking that this was source they were corresponding to a semicircular arch, that these elements they were somehow like the capitals of the springers of the arch, and but then finally we found the keystone, and this was a major breakthrough because this provided also that the shape of that arch was a pointed one, even more interestingly, a rounded center arch, and that it provided also something very important, that the width was fixing or was matching the width of the missing mihrab, of the front face of the mihrab. But still, we don't know how this was supported. It was with the molders, and at first we played with these ones. That they had exactly the same decoration. They had also the same width, but there were some strange things, but we didn't know. We said, Mabarif, they were doing strange things and creating like a new language. And it's a process of formation of this early Islamic art that is very interesting and very challenging because of this, because I used to say this is like making cocktails, that you try several things until you find something that really is a good solution and something that is feasible. So then finally, we were also classifying all these other elements, these elements that I realized that were cut with a shape. These other elements that indicated that these same elements, they were coming out of the wall because there was like a small step here, okay? And then finally, I found this solution. I understand that these elements, they were matching with the extradose of the arch, and also even the extradose of the arch, it had an area that had been polished. Meanwhile, the internal part wasn't polished. So these elements were certainly matching with each other. So this was again like another, like breaking the code of this language of which we didn't know. So this was really very interesting. And then finally, I came back to these other pilasters that were similar to the other ones that you have seen before, but these were wider, that I had discarded them because they were not matching in thickness or in width with the arch. But then I realized that there were other elements that were worth of interest. One of them was the fact that these modules, they had this distance that was matching also with these other ones. And he even traces here of the mortar still applied, of plaster applied in this line. And the important fact that the combination of the width of the front of the archivolts of the arch with this other element.
Can you point it?
Ah, sorry.
It's better, I think.
Yeah. This one.
What?
Which one is this? This one? Ah, okay, thank you. So, as I said, this thickness, the element of the frame plus the dimension of the arch was matching exactly with the width of the pillar. But furthermore, the combination of this element plus the span of the arch plus the arch itself plus these two elements was exactly matching the width of the cornice. So this, at the end of the day, was like a system of equations. When you have got 9 equations and 9 incognites, okay, that it's impossible to sort out. There is only one single solution to that problem. So this was like a system of equations. And as you can see, the whole thing was matching. We were lucky because we had all the fragments of the cornice, and I said this width was equal to the span of the arch of the mirab plus the 2 elements of the arch plus the frieze, and was also exactly the same dimension as the capital, the span of the arch of the capital. So then the confirmation with the proportion itself of the rest of the element confirmed us that the situation was very, very clear. It was matching everything with a very simple systems of proportions of the building. That's when I put forward the proposal to the Department of Antiquities of making this anastylosis. That was approved because we had 100%. In this case, we had 90% of the original fragments. So this was something really unique, and was providing us with a piece of architecture that was really shocking. I remember we had a conference in 2006 in Damascus, and Oleg Grabar came, and he was like in ecstasy. He said, "I cannot believe this." No. And he praised because the fact that we were facing here, like almost like an antecedent of a Gothic arch with one of these guardapolvos that we say in Spanish, something really very modern, very advanced to this period. Okay, but the surprises didn't stop there. So here you have got here the original fragments and those that are reintegrations, and this is the final result after we put some lime water with earth to equal the color, and this was this crazy system, even including this polygonal mirab that was really one of its kind as well. Okay, so once we had sort out the issue of the mirab, we started to try to understand the rest of the building. The interior, we knew quite already in advance quite well how it was, thanks to the documentation done by the Princeton exhibition, that they mentioned the existence of these arches and these barrel walls built with light concrete that has been added this volcanic tooth that makes it very light, so that the thrust and the weight of the walls would be very light. And this situation with these 3 barrel walls, and as you can see, even the walls starting from a first course made in stone. Okay, so this was something quite remarkable. Also, we found the other fragments of this other arch that allow us also to implement the anastilosis of the core of the mosque. Okay, because here we had also another problem that was the seismic resistance of the building, and the fact that if we would close the four walls will guarantee, a better stability. But the situation was far from being solved. Each day we were finding new elements and even more remarkable, more singular. The next ones were these fragments from a dome in pendentives. Something that is extraordinary. Once more, it's the demonstration of the guy that was working here was a master of geometry. And I remember that I showed this to my colleagues in France and in Spain who studied the stereotomy of Delorme, and they were shocked to see, in the 8th century, a dome on pendentives in which the the spherical triangles of the pendentives are also carved in the 4 arches that define the base of the dome. It was something, of an exquisite and highly developed technology in terms of geometry and stereotomy, something out of this world. We are also lucky because, as you can see, we found all the pieces of the cornice, all of them. We found also the first line of the first course of the dome, and as you can see here, most of the arches once more allow us to start to realize that we were dealing with something extraordinary also from the point of view of the history of architecture, of early Islamic architecture. But the surprise didn't end there. Then we understand that this was like an addition and that the dome itself was also like an addition. Then we started to realize that actually we were dealing not with one mosque, but with 2 mosques. Okay, one that had been built originally, this small square mosque similar to the one of Khan Sabib or al-Walid, distorted, not very well built. Okay, and probably the people, the Umayyad Caliph or the Umayyad governor say, not good enough, too small, make it look bigger. And that's the moment when a second architect is brought, is this master of geometry, and he creates this new mihrab. Okay, he creates this dome, and also more importantly, he adds this perimetral portico that transform in appearance of what was originally a very simple building of 3 naves and 10 by 10 meters into a huge building of 5 naves. Very magnificent. Okay, and also they were creating also something extraordinary. There was this kind of gate here, and a game of perspective, as you will see here, that I started to realize when we were mounting this mihrab. It was extremely complicated. This was interesting because it was very similar to the Bab al-Nasir in the Umayyad gate that gave access to the Haram al-Sharif. That is also similar to the Byzantine Chalk gate in Constantinople. And then we continue this process of classification. Then we had these other pillars that you remember that we have discarded. At first we thought that they were from the mihrab, but we realized that they were from this external portico. That they were playing exactly with the same kind of new Umayyad order. We have got Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and then we have got also like an Umayyad order. Okay, here it is. So, and this again allow to understand that this was the intention, as I said before. So it was this crafty solution that you are given, clumsy, small, awkward mosque, and you are given the task of making it great. And that's what this guy does. He plans, first of all, 2 lateral porticos, small ones that are like a translation of the internal structure of the mosque. And then in front of it, he puts this immense porch of 5 vanes that resembles a little bit to the Al-Aqsa, if you have it in mind. The Al-Aqsa is with 7 naves. This somehow resembles the Al-Aqsa, but with 5. Okay, so this led us to this process of accelerating the anastilosis of the building, and as we said, to the final conclusion that this was the result, that there was a plan, a second mosque, you know, embracing and revamping the original one. Okay. This was the original structure. And as I said, we found that here there was something else. So you can see here, there was the guy who introduced here this mirab with this ifris, this rectangular ifris. He was playing, you know, a much bigger game. Okay, it was from this simple situation that this would have been somehow the appearance of the first mosque. Okay, we prepared before we presented to the department this, that was, you know, the proposal of how it was looking like, and indicating them that we had all the fragments to implement at least the central dome. This dome was one of its kind, and it was also of extraordinary importance, because you know that in later Abbasid and architecture, especially in Morocco, in Spain, these movements of the domes above the musalla, sorry, above the mirab, or in the portico, or in the porch. Here we found somehow this antecedent, having this kind of porch, dome porch that was marking it. Here you can see what would have been the appearance of this mosque once finished, and this interesting game that, as I mentioned to you, here there was like this element, this perspective element, that I used to say that this guy was the grandfather of Borromini. I don't know if you know Palazzo Spada, the Galleria Perspectica. Well, this seems to be, you know, the antecedent of that sort of game. It's a game that, by the way, I have also found in another building I have been excavating and restoring and analyzing, that is in Khirbat al-Mafjar, where I found that there were exactly the same perspective games as you are going to see here, this kind of, you know, funnels, the visual funnels, that provides a sense of depth, a sense of distance. When you have got an arch that is framing another arch, that is framing another arch, it's like a matryoshka, like a visual matryoshka, that gives you a sense of distance, and this was something that I identified as well in Khirbat al-Mafjar. Okay, we don't have here time to analyze this, but this also proves me that most probably the same architect who did the audience hall in Khirbat al-Mafjar was the same one who made this second stage in Halabat Mosque, and the one who worked also in Hammam al-Sarraf. Okay. This is also a matter of a different and very interesting conference as well. So once we got the approval from the department, we implemented, you know, this anastilosis of the portico and of this dome open bed. So as you can see, it's one of its kind, in which we have got, as we said, all the fragments of the cornice, even the first course of the dome. And as you can see, only a few fragments of the arches, they have been smashed and broken, probably during the collapse. Then we were facing with another strange situation. Say, well, I said, it's statistically impossible that you have got all the stones here, all the stones of the cornice, all the stones from the first course, and we don't have any dome, any other stone from the dome. It was impossible. So at first I would say, well, maybe it's because they didn't finish it. And then I realized that this situation is exactly the same one that we have got in the barrel vaults in the prying hall. Remember that there is this barrel vault made with this light concrete, but the first two courses are made with stone. Exactly like here. And this drove me to the conclusion that probably the architect who made the second intervention also changed the roof of the mosque. And that probably originally it was like in Khan Sabib or most of the mosques here, it was a very simple, pitched wooden roof with three lines of pitched roof covering that. And then probably in this second intervention also he changed this. Okay, before these barrel vaults would have been very difficult to be supported by these slender walls and these cranky walls of the first mosque. But now that we had this portico embracing the mosque, you could build safely these walls. So the whole thing started to make sense that the intervention had been much more ambitious and much more complete. So these are the results, okay? And this is, let's say, the final stage. The point that we hadn't finished here, okay? As we said, we had a jump from this situation, and we also have found this incredible situation that is so beautiful. This idea of becoming and making this site more magnificent, okay, with this game of perspective. Because here, as you can see, you have got the semicircular arch or the pointed arch of the mihrab is framed by the rectangular frieze, that is framed by the rectangular gate, that is framed by the arch of the pendentive, that is framed by the frontal arch. So when you are in front of it, you have this feeling of depth that is really fantastic. This, by the way, is a system of creating depth that has been used even by painters recently. When you look at Vermeer and all these painters from Holland, they paint interiors, but they create this sense of depth by making this framing of one door within another door within another door until the street, okay? Alternating light and dark. So this, I would call them scenographic resources of this master architect, also allow him to create here a masterpiece of architecture in this sense. And as I said, I was at a certain moment even dizzy to say, well, it's impossible to we have still and more pieces and more fragments. And then we still had many of these fragments, okay? And that's why I decided that in order not to go too much far away in the intervention, many of these fragments, even if we had slightly doubts, what we were going to do is to make this partial anastylosis in a presentation in the site museum. Because this was, as I explained to you at the beginning of this morning, that our aim was not only to excavate, to get all the historical information, but also to preserve and to interpret and present this to the visitor so that they will understand fully what we are, what we have, okay? And this also was the idea of making all this, what we call this Japanese garden, as we call it, okay, with this partial anastylosis of the different arches. As you can see, it's unbelievable that we have got in the same building the two possible solutions for polylobe arch, okay? The one is a really beautiful one, but will not have success. This is the one that will have success. And here we have got this experimental moment in which they are making the different options and making a trial and error, okay? Or, in one single building, you had very, very different arches of different types, okay? That's why I triggered this research, understanding that some of these elements, they were brought from Yemen, okay? It's the typical shape of this. Even you can see here, this small cuttings here is exactly the same solution that you have got in Yemen to introduce these wooden beams to create these shades. So this is a typical arch that, together with other building techniques, the mortars used, etc., we understood also there was strong influence from Yemen. As I said, I cannot go very much in detail at this point. But as I mentioned, this is, this experimental process of finding these different types of polylobe arch. This one that I have found, it's a transposition of wood. This monastery is in Ethiopia and southern Yemen. That is another element that traveled from there. The acquisition of this between parabolic and the three center arches that we started to see in this period applied in the mosque. So in earlier, it's very curious why they Cochard made, first of all, this reconstruction, and suddenly it was transformed into a much more classical. And I would like to know why on hell this guy made this proposal, because probably he had more piece of evidence, but not enough to prove that. Like these other elements. We had also these crazy elements for making the granulation, some of them with the typical step Maya granulation. This other one with this kind of croterion, this kind of decoration from classical origin, that they were part, again, another kind of almost IKEA pieces, modular elements that can be combined in many, many different ways. So they can combine, as you will see, in this fashion, this other one, and they can provide you these different types of lines of correlation. Okay, some of them not very probable. Those other ones, on the contrary, quite feasible or quite probable to have been. So that's why I presented this in the site museum. But also with the same pieces, you can also produce the big correlations for the castle. So it's something great. And as I said, the only thing where I see this same idea of prefabrication and modular design is here again in Hirbat Mahjar. Okay, so these other elements, including important issues like these modillones de arroyos, these roll brackets that we have got here, that were from the cornice of the mirab. They were extremely important because they were also the antecedents of Islamic architecture that we have got in Al-Andalus. Okay, so here we were finding, the source of many, many architectural elements that we will see afterwards export and develop there. But even we found interesting elements regarding, we could call it sociological analysis of early Islam practices. And it's the fact that in this building that had been that was built attached to the mosque, we found this was a strange structure from a typological point of view. It was not a house. It was like this very ample space of reception, okay, with this service room and this tiny room here that was something extraordinary. Because I said, what the heck is this? A bed, mortar and plaster, okay? But when we examined, we found here something even more extraordinary, a drain, a hole. So what I conclude is that this is, the demonstration that these practices, early Islamic practices of washing up the corpse, wrapping it in the shroud, to be taken afterwards, immediately to the mosque, and then afterwards to the maqbara, to the cemetery that is in front of it, was already part of the design of early Islamic mosques. And this is the earliest example in which I have found, in which you have got beside the mosque, that probably was like a small congregational mosque for the community here, to have this very interesting element that is the place where corpses were washed up, were shrouded, in order to be taken afterwards to the mosque. So even from this point of view, the mosque is of uttermost importance because it presents, these Islamic practices already in the 8th century. Okay. Okay, we are about to finish, So, and as I said, the next step, it was how to convey all this information. That's why I made a lot of effort to get new funds from the Spanish Cooperation to build the site museum that I invite you to visit. Okay, it's not yet finished because it's a process in the making, and in which we presented all these evidences from the castle and from the mosque, where you can see this outdoor exhibition of all these architectural elements from the mosque, but also all these elements from the castle. Okay, even these fragments of the anastasia, and this partial anastylosis of all these other fragments of the mosque that I declined to complete the restoration because there were certain levels of uncertainty, and I didn't want, let's say, to overdo the intervention. So this is the process of constructing this display of these elements, okay, showing them how these elements they would have been arranged originally. It's sort of incredible collection of so just to finish, I want to show to you now the video, the reconstruction video that is presented in the visitor center, because as I said, our idea is our most important duty, and as let's say our social responsibility as researchers, architects and archaeologists, is to convey all this information to the public. That's why I made this effort for presenting the site museum that will contextualize all the elements that are found, that will explain the whole thing, Also, we made a video that I am going to show to you so that the people will understand better, just with images, with almost no text, what was the complex. And now I am very proud to announce you that in a few months, probably June, something like that, we are going to have online a guide app, so that in your tablets or in your mobiles, you can have all this information so that you can get all this presentation of the site available in your device, in your mobile or your tablet. Actually, in the coming future, our dream would be to have internet beacons there, so that even you can have augmented reality, so that you can look in your screen what is the virtual reconstruction, this augmented reality, and then you can see completed with all the decoration, the original fragments of and the original appearance of the building. So now, can you please put the video? So let's go to the this one. So this is just to. Oh, this is not seen in here in the screen. Habibi, it's not seen. So this is a very old. This is from 2009. So nowadays the motors of rendering are much better, but still, this provides the visitor a very good idea of what was the appearance of this building. This is, as you see, this is virtual reality. Okay, this 3D reconstruction. But the next step would be to have this augmented reality, so that you can look with Google or with your Googles or with your mobile, you can see what was the appearance of the building. In some cases, as you will see, we have even presented the different steps of the evolution of the building, making like going back in time, this kind of scenographic resource of making a flashback to see how was the appearance of the monument in different periods of history. Here you can see, for instance, some of this, the appearance of the courtyard. This is the Umayyad decoration that was applied. These are the canopies that were created in Ghassanic period, but redecorated in Umayyad one. So I said it's a very, very complex building with a very complex history. And this is the access to what was the first Roman fort that was transformed into a monastery by the Ghassanids, and then afterwards into kitchens and stores by the Umayyads. So we are trying always to make this fusion with the actual element that we have restored, that we have made anastillosis, so that people will understand what is missing, and this can be better done with this augmented reality that will provide a much more interesting experience for the visitor. Okay, this is the access to the area of the kitchens, the storerooms, etc. Let's go a bit. I will let it run, and we can talk. And even if you have got any questions, please don't hesitate. We can take advantage. Meanwhile, we have the video running. If you have got any question in this regard, because as I said, this is somehow my personal compromise and my interest is, let's say, to convey to the public all this information. That's why, for instance, I have, before having a full monograph, I have put more effort in preparing all these guide apps and all this information that on the museum itself, so that the general public will gain knowledge and will gain access to all this information. Okay, with the scholars, we have got a much more fluid correspondence, etc. And somehow the final publication can wait for a while, but I didn't want, let's say, that the people wait longer for gaining all this information. I'm going to jump, because the video, I have realized, is very long, okay, explaining the different, doesn't allow me to jump. This is the chapel of the Ghassanid monastery inside it. Okay, the political reconstruction. These are the frames of the Umayyad gates carved in stucco. See, so nowadays we have got better rendering motors and engines that makes the things look nicer. So let me go a bit farther. These are some of the other rooms. Sorry, because it's otherwise is very long, and I don't want to keep you here waiting for a long time. This is, as we said, all the fragments of stucco, even if we are finding their position in the building and putting them back in place so that people will fully understand what was the complexity in terms of decoration of this building. Okay, and as I said, not only in Umayyad period, we have to realize that here we have got, first of all, a Roman fort from the 2nd century when the Romans overtook probably a station from the Nabateans. Then this first Roman fort from the 2nd century was enlarged into a cavalry quadriburgium, a cavalry fort. And then this was abandoned. And finally, it was reoccupied and transformed into a monastery and a palace by the Ghassanids. And when the Ghassanids left, the Umayyads overtook the place and they transformed into a castle in one of these places for, implementing this clientelar policy with the Bedouins in the area. Here you can see, for instance, the flashback to the Ghassanid period from the Umayyad one, explaining this different, and this in some cases refurbishment that implied in Umayyad period just redecoration of the site. So this another day, if we have got time and you have got patience, we can analyze this other building more in detail. But it's the riches and the potential of information that these monuments they have, it's actually extraordinary. That's why, trying to close the loop, as I mentioned before, these monuments are more important even as documents, because they are the most reliable source of information through this analysis of the material remains of the history and its own evolution and its own transformation throughout time. And I think that this is the most important element from a scientific point of view, and this is also what we want also to convey to the visitor, so that this complex layering will be somehow broken into pieces that are easily understood by local people, by normal people, not by scholars. And I think that just by looking at these images, even without having an explanation in words, people, they can understand this transformation and these changes. Okay? And this is also, as I said, something very relevant and very important for preserving the sites, because by creating this awareness and this feeling of belonging to the local communities is the best way to transform these local populations in the guardians of these monuments. Okay, this is just to finish, just a couple of minutes. The appearance of the mosque, as I explained in this final Umayyad period, this impressive approach with this Borrominian perspective effect. Okay, and this is one of the hypotheses of the final appearance of the building. Really a remarkable piece of architecture. Explain the location of all the elements, the location of the mihrab, the crenellations, all these elements that the people they will see in the site museum. Okay, then they can figure out by having a look to the video what was the appearance of the building in the different steps. Okay. So we will stop here. I just wanted to thank you once more for your patience, the department for their kind invitation, and I hope that you will find the presentation this morning interesting. Okay, so thank you.
and our efforts, a great effort towards of the archaeological site in Jordan. And any questions of the audience?
I have a question. I have a question.
Thank you.
It's interesting annex building, which has that bed for washing the dead bodies. For me, that's indicate this place should be like a center, and there is at least thousands of people living around it. It's not matching with that desert castle or idea. Is that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to remind that Halabat is not only the mosque and the castle and the bathhouse, but also you have got a huge agricultural complex and many houses down in the lower area in the slope. That was a small community, like a small village. Probably this village was originated as the vicus of the Roman fort, creating, it was a good place for staying because there is plenty of water. So a place where people, they can make a living, okay? And this was certainly a place where, as I said, it's more than a mosque. I think we could call it almost like a congregational mosque, like a jamia, from this small community living not only in the palace, but in the surroundings. Because these palaces, we can see them, first of all, from my point of view, as mechanisms of diplomacy, by means of which the Umayyads, they were able to establish this political clientelar links with the local population, exactly the same as the Hashemites with the Bedouins, exactly the same policy, the same strategy, the same point of view. And this is something really very interesting from a sociological point of view. But also, they were also a way of creating small cities, small ways of populating this area and settling this area in the fringe of the Badia. I think was really very important because, as I said, regrettably, we don't have time to go in detail because this is fascinating. This is socio-historical aspects of Halabat, but this is a place where since Roman times and even before, there was this interaction between settled populations, Fellahin and Bedouin. And from the interaction of this, trigger a very fruitful policy of political and clientelar policy. First of all, between the Romans and the nomads, then in between the Ghassanids and the tribes of which they make somehow head of them, okay, as philarchs of all the Arabs of the area, and then afterwards in between the Umayyads and this semi-nomadic population of Bedouins, because they were somehow the back spine of the Umayyad state. Similarly, as I said, to the modern Bedouin tribes are the back spine of the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. And that's why it's so important, because we see that there is this continuity of this linkage of the same partners, the same actors, interacting in the same way as they have been interacting and in this kind of social symbiosis in between Fellahin and Bedouin from Roman times until today. And this is also why it's so important, because you understand from this side that despite all the changes and all the different governments and Romans, Umayyads, Abbasi, whatever, Hashemites, there is something that remains on the spot. And this is social interaction in between these social groups that have been living here since prehistorical times. And that's why this place is so important, because it presents this continuity. That's why I was speaking with Dr. Fadi, even the possibility of presenting this site as a candidate of World Heritage Site, because not only of the beauties and the all these architectural features that are really unique for the early Islamic art, but because it represents the continuity of this interaction in between the local populations that have been living here from antiquity until today, as a symbol of social continuity until nowadays. Okay.
Thank you. Another question about the long on the pendentive questions.
Oh, pendentives, yeah.
That's very difficult. Did you discover how to find a guide from the center to to find the edge of this pendant, it's very hard. For the normal pendant on the square or on the semicircular second arm, which is like equal from the top and from the sides. That's the easy way. You can find a guide from the center to build this pendant. We saw another example, like you found a pointed arch, you carry the dome, but the pendant is semicircular pendant. The pointed pendant is the hardest one. So my question, did you find a way how to find the center to guide these?
Yeah, let's say, as I explained before, the extreme accuracy of the geometry that had been applied in the stereotomy, in the cutting of this stone, was so remarkable. That was so easy to find the centers and to find all the geometrical proportions. Everything was milli. There is no this other situation that, you know, maybe like this, you know, when Creswell was measuring that the distance in between the arches, that maybe it's 1.6, 1.7. No, here it was absolutely perfect. So it was an absolutely control of the geometry of the architectural element and how it was afterwards very easy to retrieve the centers of the arches and the, you know, the center of the sphere of the pendentives. Everything was in its place. You know, it was really shocking. You know, I had never expected that level of accuracy. It was really, you know, a master of a mahlem of geometry, the guy who made this work. Yes.
I have a question.
Job, very good lecture. I have attention about all instruction methods.
Sorry.
All instruction methods.
The building techniques. Yes.
Yes. Can we have more information about this, or you can give me some books? Or...
Yeah, you can download from academia.edu. I've got many of the articles, all of those that I have been allowed to upload. You can download from there, and you have got, for instance, interesting paper on Umayyad building techniques, another one on Umayyad arches, vaults, and domes. There are several of these papers focused on building techniques, where you can find them. You're most welcome.
Ignacio, I have a question. I have a question.
Hi, Rami.
Hi, Ignacio. Thank you for a very interesting lecture. I have two questions, actually. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah,
loud and clear.
Yeah, good. The first question is regarding the resources for studying the past. It's very interesting to see how, you know, this archaeology of architecture through the typological analyses and the chronology and so on. And I was wondering, were there any historic documents from the times of building, you know, either Halabat or Amman or any other Umayyad structures? Were there any historic documents that were available? Because we know that, you know, there were also historic documents from earlier Byzantine periods and so on and so forth. So I was wondering if there were any historic documents that contributed to the understanding of the structures, in addition to the buildings themselves. And the second question is, through this process of anastylosis, it's very obvious that, for example, there is this distinction between the new stones and the original fragments and the original stones. Were there any other approaches to creating the distinction, in addition to the fact that you can distinguish the new from the old? Because after a while, with a patina, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to identify what was added and what was already existing, either within the structure or as a fragment. So what are, you know, your approaches to creating that distinction, basically? Thank you.
Thank you, Rami. Well, regarding the first question, regrettably, I would say that the Umayyad architecture one of these areas where archaeology of architecture is so much needed, because very few historical documents make reference to these buildings. For instance, we have reference, for instance, in the Kitab al-Aghani in poems, that they make reference to Castal or to Castalain and the Muakkar, but for instance, no single word regarding anything called like Halabat. I doubt that the original name was Halabat. I have got reasons, and I published it, to think that the original name of the site was Sarah, and that it was kept only in the Hammam, and that the whole thing, because actually the other written document that could mention this site is the list of monasteries from the Ghassanid period, the list of the Archimandrite, and another document in which, in both of them, is mentioned a monastery called Deir al-Sarrah. So most probably it was making reference to this site in pre-Islamic times. So this is what I think. But as I said, no piece of evidence. And as I said, sometimes there are description of even of the Dome of the Rock, but no proper written documents, because also you have to take into account that after the coup of the Abbasids, the Umayyads, they suffer a sort of damnatio memoria, or what we call nowadays a cancellation policy. That all the records, everything was cancelled because they were seen, as evil or whatsoever, and almost very few documents were left from that period. And especially nothing making reference to this. Regarding your second question regarding the anastylosis, I have to say that even with the patina, you still can always very easily distinguish the old and the new. But even so, we have, for instance, even some small tricks. For instance, in the interior of the mosque, the original masonry is made with square stones, but not so precise, and it has like a small chipping in the jointing and a mortar in between. And meanwhile, the areas that we rebuild, we have done the blocks slightly more accurate, and without mortar and without any chipping in the joint, so that you cannot miss it. And apart from that, I have failed to show to you here. We have got all the photogrammetric documentation before and after. I should have done that. Sorry for this. I forgot to put that slide, in which the whole thing is documented, how it was before and how it has been restored afterwards. So in this sense, there is no possibility of getting mistaken, even if all this documentation I have produced would be lost, like this morning. You still can go there and you can make again a stratigraphical reading, and you can distinguish the original stratigraphical units from the new ones that we have added, even if they are an anastylosis and it's a reconstruction with the original fragments.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are most welcome, Rami. Anything else? Julie. Yes.
So I have just to remark that it was very interesting to see how anastylosis is not just a rebuilding, it's also a way to study the building. And so I think it's interesting because now in Jordan there is a lot of projects with conservation, and I think it should be done always with research, because if it's done just for touristic management, we will lose information. So it was really clear for Halabat.
Thank you very much indeed. I can tell you that about the many nights that I was not able to sleep, saying I am 99.999% sure, but if I am missing something, there was some moments that my legs were trembling, and that's why, for instance, certain elements I decided not to go further. So we restored what we had 100% certainty, and the other ones we made this partial reconstruction in the museum, and then with the videos and with this 3D reconstruction we can play. Because, for instance, what were the different kind of crenellations or how they were disposed? We have, very good hypotheses, but this area, for instance, as I said, I kept a minute of silence, as Adolf Loos used to say. Try to be quiet and to step back. Okay. So, anything else?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ignacio, again. And
thank you very much.
I'd like to allow us to give you a small gifts. Appreciate this valuable lecture.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Ignacio, on behalf of the video staff. We would like to thank you for this lecture and presentation. It was very fruitful, and we would like just to thank you on behalf of the EOA staff. Thank you so much again, and you are most welcome.
Thank you, my friend. So thank you all of you.
Family photo. You know,